You're listening to the CyberWire Network, powered by N2K.
Risk and compliance shouldn't slow your business down. Hyperproof helps you automate controls, integrate real-time risk workflows, and build a centralized system of trust so your teams can focus on growth, not spreadsheets. From faster audits to stronger stakeholder confidence, Hyperproof gives you the business advantage of smarter compliance. Visit www.hyperproof.io to see how leading teams are transforming their GRC programs. Patch your Linux systems? No, seriously, sudo, patch your Linux systems. Cisco has removed a critical backdoor account that gave remote attackers root privileges. The Hunters International Ransomware Group rebrands and closes up shop. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services notifies over 100,000 people that their personal data was compromised. Nimdor is a sophisticated North Korean cyber campaign targeting macOS. Researchers uncover a massive phishing campaign using thousands of fake retail websites. The FBI's top cyber official says Salt Typhoon is largely contained. Microsoft tells customers to ignore Windows firewall error warnings. A California jury orders Google to pay $314 million for collecting Android user data without consent. Ben Yellen shares insights from this year's Supreme Court session, and ransomware negotiations with a side of side hustle. It's Thursday, July 3rd, 2025. I'm Dave Bittner, and this is your CyberWire Intel Briefing. Thanks for joining us here today. It's great as always to have you with us. Security researchers have found two serious elevation of privileges vulnerabilities in sudo, the critical Linux utility installed on nearly all servers and workstations. The first flaw affects multiple versions. It lets local users gain full root access by abusing the chroot function, even without specific sudo rules. The bug was introduced in June 2023 and impacts multiple systems like Ubuntu and Fedora. Users are urged to upgrade immediately. The second flaw is an elevation of privilege bug that remained hidden for 12 years. It affects multiple stable versions and legacy versions, allowing privilege escalation in configurations using host or host alias directives, common in enterprises. Though low in severity, it still poses a risk. Stratascale warns these vulnerabilities highlight operational gaps, urging businesses to audit environments, strengthen detection, and patch systems to avoid hidden threats undermining trust and compliance. Cisco has removed a critical backdoor account from its unified communications manager that allowed unauthenticated remote attackers to log in with root privileges. The flaw results from static root credentials left over from development and testing. There are no workarounds. Admins must upgrade or apply patches. Successful exploitation lets attackers execute commands as root. While Cisco has seen no active attacks yet, it released indicators of compromise to help detect breaches. This was the latest in a series of backdoor removals from Cisco products, including previous issues in iOS XE, DNA Center, WAS, and Smart Licensing Utility, highlighting ongoing risks from hard-coded credentials in enterprise infrastructure. The Hunters International Ransomware Group has shut down its operations and is offering free decryptors to help victims recover data without paying ransoms. In a dark web statement, the gang cited recent developments for its closure, likely referencing increased law enforcement scrutiny and declining profits. Hunters International emerged in late 2023 and was suspected to be a rebrand of Hive due to code similarities. It targeted nearly 300 organizations worldwide, including the U.S. Marshals Service, Hoya, Tata Technologies, Auto Canada, Austral USA, Integris Health, and Fred Hutch Cancer Center. While it previously combined encryption with extortion, the group recently launched WorldLeaks, an extortion-only operation. Victims can request decryption tools and recovery guidance via the gang's website. Threat analysts warn this shutdown does not end its threat actors' activities, as affiliates may migrate to other ransomware or data extortion groups. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, is notifying 103,000 people that their personal data was compromised after fraudsters created fake Medicare.gov accounts using valid beneficiary information between 2023 and 2025. The scheme came to light in May when beneficiaries reported account creation letters they didn't initiate. Attackers used stolen data, including Medicare beneficiary identifiers, dates of birth, and zip codes, from unknown external sources to create accounts and potentially access additional information like provider details, diagnoses, and premium data. CMS deactivated affected accounts, replaced Medicare cards for victims, and blocked new account creation from foreign IP addresses. While no misuse has been reported yet, CMS continues to investigate. The incident follows broader warnings about rising healthcare scams exploiting people's fear of losing access to care, as cybercriminals increasingly target government healthcare programs for profit. Sentinel Labs has uncovered a sophisticated North Korean cyber campaign targeting Web3 and cryptocurrency firms using new macOS malware called NIMDOR. Revealed on July 2nd, the report details multi-stage attacks leveraging social engineering, fake Zoom updates, and the rare NIM programming language to evade detection. Hackers pose as trusted contacts on Telegram, sending malicious Zoom SDK scripts heavily disguised to install additional tools. Once inside, they deploy a C++ injector to steal keychain passwords, browser data, and Telegram chats, and install NIMDOR for long-term access. The malware uses encrypted WebSocket communications and techniques to stay active even after a shutdown. Sentinel Labs warns that North Korea's adoption of cross-platform languages like NIM plus clever AppleScript use makes detection harder. The report urges companies to strengthen defenses against these evolving persistent threats targeting the crypto and Web3 sector. Researchers uncovered a massive phishing campaign using thousands of fake retail websites, impersonating brands like Apple, PayPal, Nordstrom, and Hermes to steal credit card data. First flagged in Mexico, security firm Silent Push found it targets English and Spanish users globally. Some sites convincingly mimic retail stores with scraped listings and Google Pay widgets, while others are poorly built. Technical indicators suggest Chinese cybercriminals are behind it. Many sites remain active despite takedowns, highlighting the persistent threat of retail-themed phishing scams. In an interview with Tim Starks from Cyberscoop, Brett Leatherman, the FBI's new top cyber official, said Chinese hackers behind the telecommunications breach known as Salt Typhoon are currently largely contained and dormant within networks, but still pose a threat. Although Salt Typhoon is known for espionage, Leatherman warned their access could pivot to destructive actions similar to Volt Typhoon, which is pre-positioned in U.S. critical infrastructure. 9 U.S. telecom companies were impacted, with more victims identified abroad due to information sharing. Leatherman emphasized continued focus on victim support, resilience, and deterrence, though offensive operations require further attribution. Evicting Salt Typhoon remains challenging due to their entrenched foothold. He also flagged North Korean IT scams as a growing insider risk that could evolve into intellectual property theft or brokering access for broader cyber operations. Microsoft has told customers to ignore Windows firewall error warnings labeled Event 2042, appearing after the June 2025 preview update on some Windows 11 systems. These config read failed errors result from a new unfinished feature and do not affect firewall functionality or system processes. Microsoft said no action is required and they're working on a fix. The errors appear in event viewer logs but can be safely disregarded, according to the company's Windows Release Health dashboard this week. A California jury has ordered Google to pay $314 million for collecting Android user data over cellular networks without consent in a class action lawsuit dating back to 2019. Plaintiffs argued Google's passive data transfers used users' paid cellular data for its own benefit, including targeted ads, and continued even after apps were closed. The lawsuit said these transfers occurred silently, even while devices sat idle overnight and couldn't be fully disabled. Google argued the data transfers are minimal and essential for security and device performance, stating users consented through settings and terms of use. A spokesperson said Google will appeal, calling the ruling a setback for users. Coming up after the break, Ben Yelin shares insights from this year's Supreme Court session and ransomware negotiations with a side of side hustle. Stick around. Did you know Active Directory is targeted in 9 out of 10 cyber attacks? Once attackers get in, they can take control of your entire network. That's why Semprus created Purple Knight, the free security assessment tool that scans your Active Directory for hundreds of vulnerabilities and shows you how to fix them. Join thousands of IT pros using Purple Knight to stay ahead of threats. Download it now at semprus.com/purple-knight. That's semprus.com/purple-knight. And now a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud. Identity is the new battleground, and attackers are exploiting stolen identities to infiltrate your organization. Traditional defenses can't keep up. SpyCloud's holistic identity threat protection helps security teams uncover and automatically remediate hidden exposures across your users, from breaches, malware, and phishing to neutralize identity-based threats like account takeover, fraud, and ransomware. Don't let invisible threats compromise your business. Get your free corporate darknet exposure report at spycloud.com/cyberwire and see what attackers already know. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And joining me once again is Ben Yelin. He is from the University of Maryland Center for Cyber Health and Hazard Strategies. Ben, it's always great to have you back.
Good to be with you, Dave.
We just finished up our Supreme Court term here for the year, and there's some cases here that caught your eye that are worth sharing with our audience here. What do you got?
There are really two cases that caught my eye. One applies very generally, and that means it does apply to a lot of the topics you cover on the daily podcast and over on Caveat. And one I think is more specific to the world of cyber, world of data privacy. So I'll talk about the general one first. This is a case that has to do with what are called universal injunctions. So it's the ability of individual federal district court judges to issue holdings that don't only apply to the parties in that case, whether that party is an individual plaintiff or something like a state, but applies across the country. So this has been a phenomenon going back 20, 25 years. We've had a lot of these so-called universal injunctions. This case was about one, or a few of them actually, relating to a Trump administration executive order on birthright citizenship. So that executive order narrowed the definition of birthright citizenship in the United States. Some individual plaintiffs, as well as states, brought litigation saying that this new policy violates the 14th Amendment, which says that anybody born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction of the United States is a citizen of the United States.
Okay.
And those parties obtained universal injunctions. So court said, not only am I ruling out or forbidding enforcement of this policy against the plaintiffs in this case, but I am prohibiting the enforcement of this policy across the entire country.
Okay.
And in a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court said that is no longer acceptable. It is not within the traditions of our judicial system. It's not well grounded in the Constitution or in the Judiciary Act of 1789, which governs a lot of how our judicial branch works. So what that means in practice is even if you as a plaintiff think that a executive action, whether it's a bill that's signed or whether it's an executive order, if you think that's blatantly unconstitutional, you're going to have to go court by court across the country with a class of plaintiffs that meet standing requirements to get specific injunctions that apply to a bunch of plaintiffs. You're no longer going to have this out where you just have to find one plaintiff in one district and you can get the entire policy struck down across the country. So now, the one way you would get that type of universal applicability would be to do a class action lawsuit, and you'd have to establish a really large class, and that's a very difficult, cumbersome process. So it's going to be much harder to obtain universal nationwide relief, judicial relief from some of these policies, and I think that could have wide-reaching implications in all spheres of the law. So that's
for example, for our cyber concerns, you could see if someone brought a case where they thought there was some unconstitutional privacy concern, for example, it would not be allowed to be paused nationwide.
Exactly. So let's say you had a bunch of plaintiffs in the state of Maryland, where we are. They could sue in a federal district court in Maryland. Whatever decision that court came up with, if they issued an injunction against enforcement of that policy, that injunction could only apply to that class of plaintiffs in the state of Maryland. It could only apply to the litigants in this case. Now, incidentally, if it applies to the plaintiffs in Maryland, then it will probably end up applying to almost everybody in Maryland. Like if it's some type of privacy policy, it will apply to everybody within that jurisdiction.
Okay.
But it wouldn't apply to people across the country that are subject to the jurisdiction of other federal district courts. So that's just a tool that's now out of the toolbox. You can't obtain these nationwide injunctions. And we've seen a lot of them not only during the Trump administration, but also the Biden administration on the other side. A lot of people in the conservative legal community were going to a single district court judge in Texas during the Biden administration to try to obtain these universal injunctions against policies they didn't agree with, and they were successful. And that's no longer a tool that's going to be available to them next time we have a Democratic president.
Interesting. All right. Well, the next one is a little more directly related.
Yeah. So this one comes from the state of Texas. This is a case called Free Speech Coalition Incorporated v. Paxton, who was the Attorney General of Texas. So Texas passed a statute requiring age verification for accessing pornographic websites. The rationale, of course, being that they don't want children to access this type of pornographic material. Which is self-explanatory, seems very reasonable. Free Speech Coalition is a group of free speech advocates. They were joined by representatives of many of these pornographic websites in suing the state of Texas, saying that this is a violation of adults' First Amendment rights. So the thinking is, even though this policy is designed to prevent children from accessing these websites, it will have an impact on adults who have First Amendment associational rights to view this type of pornographic material. By having required age verification, it might burden adults' ability to view this material.
Right.
So the Supreme Court, in this case, another 6-3 decision along ideological lines, upheld the constitutionality of this Texas law. A big question was what level of scrutiny would apply to this statute. Generally, when you have a restriction on speech based on its content, courts will apply what's called strict scrutiny, which is the highest level of scrutiny, which in normal parlance just means you better have a darn good reason to do what you're doing.
Right.
The dissent was adamant in saying that strict scrutiny should apply here. And even though Texas does have a compelling interest in preventing children from accessing pornographic material, they are not using the least restrictive means of achieving that objective. There are other ways that you could stop children from accessing these websites without having what they consider to be burdensome procedures for age verification, which might include things like submitting personally identifiable information that then go on the internet, that are sold on the dark web, potentially.
Right. You have leaks and things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The majority opinion said that strict scrutiny should not apply, that in cases where there is no facial prohibition on adults accessing these websites, it's only an incidental burden, and really the policy is intended to keep children from accessing this website, then only intermediate scrutiny, which is kind of the middle level of scrutiny, should apply. And as long as the government has an important interest here, which Texas does, and the means of achieving that interest is substantially related to that interest, then the law is constitutionally permissible. And what the Supreme Court is saying here is Texas made a reasonable judgment that the best way to achieve the objective of keeping kids away from pornographic material is to have age verification procedures, that is constitutionally acceptable. They don't have to find the least restrictive means of achieving that objective, as long as they're using means that are pretty closely related to achieving those legislative ends. So as a result, I think we're going to see a lot more laws across the country with age verification requirements for pornographic websites. Now that the Supreme Court has said that requiring people to submit proof of age beyond just, hey, click this box if you're 18, but let's you upload a government-issued ID. Or there are some other procedures that send people to third-party sites where they have to upload their ID.
Yeah.
That type of requirement is now deemed constitutional according to our Supreme Court. So I think that's going to impact regulations on access to these websites in a whole bunch of different states.
Yeah, interesting. All right. Well, Ben Yellen is from the University of Maryland Center for Cyber Health and Hazard Strategies. Ben, thank you for joining us and explaining it.
Always good to be with you, Dave.
Did you know Active Directory is targeted in 9 out of 10 cyber attacks? Once attackers get in, they can take control of your entire network. That's why Sempris created Purple Knight, the free security assessment tool that scans your Active Directory for hundreds of vulnerabilities and shows you how to fix them. Join thousands of IT pros using Purple Knight to stay ahead of threats. Download it now at sempris.com/purple-knight. That's sempris.com/purple-knight.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
And finally, our ransom shenanigans desk tells us that Digital Mint, a company that negotiates with ransomware hackers on behalf of victims, is now investigating one of its own. The former employee allegedly struck side deals with hackers to pocket some extra crypto, because apparently salary negotiations weren't enough excitement. Digital Mint swiftly fired the employee, who remains unnamed and is cooperating with the Justice Department's probe. CEO Jonathan Solomon assured clients they acted swiftly, while President Mark Grenz touted transparency as Digital Mint's cultural backbone. Meanwhile, cybersecurity experts dryly note that ransomware negotiators aren't exactly incentivized to lower demands if their profits scale with payment size. As ever, analysts caution that paying ransoms only emboldens attackers. In short, even ransomware negotiators may need their own negotiators, preferably ones without side hustles. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. A programming note that we will not be publishing tomorrow, July 4th, in observation of Independence Day here in the U.S. We plan to share some programming from across the N2K CyberWire network for you to enjoy. Have a safe holiday. We'd love to hear from you. We're conducting our annual audience survey to learn more about our listeners. We're collecting your insights through August 31st. There's a link in the show notes. Please do check it out. N2K's senior producer is Alice Carruth. Our CyberWire producer is Liz Stokes. We're mixed by Elliot Peltzman and Trey Hester, with original music by Elliot Peltzman. Our executive producer is Jennifer Iben. Peter Kilpie is our publisher, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next week. Hey everybody, Dave here. I've talked about Delete Me before, and I'm still using it because it still works. It's been a few months now, and I'm just as impressed today as I was when I signed up. Delete Me keeps finding and removing my personal information from data broker sites, and they keep me updated with detailed reports, so I know exactly what's been taken down. I'm genuinely relieved knowing my privacy isn't something I have to worry about every day. The Delete Me team handles everything. It's the set it and forget it peace of mind. And it's not just for individuals. Delete Me also offers solutions for businesses, helping companies protect their employees' personal information and reduce exposure to social engineering and phishing threats. And right now, our listeners get a special deal, 20% off your Delete Me plan. Just go to joindeleteme.com/N2K and use promo code N2K at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/N2K, code N2K.